Well, welcome to the Followup podcast. My name is Hayden. I am the worship director here at Arbor Church. And today I'm joined by Alison, our community care pastor, with her heart. Cliff Tadema, our interim pastor. And Bryan Cobley, our students director. Are you doing an acceptance? You're hugging your trophy that you've been given?
Yeah, that's what I was doing.
He is our students director, and he was our speaker on Sunday. And Bryan had the honors. Honor.
Did I have more than one?
We only have one service. It was one honor.
Yeah, it was one honor. Bryan had the honor of closing out our summer with Jesus, which I didn't realize was so deeply contested. But I think of the end of summer when school starts. But a lot of people say it's like the third week of September when fall actually starts. But we decided to close out a summer with Jesus right when school was starting. So, Bryan, was this your only sermon in this series? Or did you have another one?
I did the Talking with Jesus.
That's right.
At the well.
Yes. That was like June? Was that July? It was right after summer camp.
It was July. Yeah, it was July.
It was right
July.
after youth... after the youth summer camp.
Yes.
Now I'm remembering. It's all coming back to me.
Yeah, July. So July 25th.
July 25th.
Wow.
Yeah.
Seems so long ago.
I know.
Oh my
It
gosh.
does.
What a season.
So Bryan, before we hop into breaking it down more, I'd like to just start at the beginning. When did you decide what you were going to speak on?
Like 3 weeks ago, because I found out that I was speaking this Sunday like 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
Because the original thing was I was going to preach August 22nd, but then we decided to participate in the Serve Day. And so that sermon got canned, or not canned, just not done. And so then Alison was like, hey, do you want to do Labor Day weekend? I'm like, yeah, I would love that. And so with knowing that I was ending the series, it was very easy to decide what I was going to preach.
Yeah. How did you come to this topic specifically?
It was because I knew that I was ending summer with Jesus, that I thought it was a perfect opportunity to look at the time when the disciples, like in-person time with Jesus, was coming to an end, and it was now their time to show up and represent Jesus to the world. So I thought it was very
You were very literal.
Apropos is the word. Yeah.
Very literal. You're like, our summer with Jesus is closing. Their time with Jesus was closing.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. So it was very easy to come.
So you went to that story in the New Testament.
Mm-hmm.
When did you arrive at the whole main point of it all? Was it?
That was actually the first thing.
First thing. Okay.
This one was actually pretty topical. I knew, like talking with Cliff and Alison, that I wanted there to be a time that you spend with Jesus and a time to show up like Jesus. And I knew around what time of Jesus' life that I was going to focus on. I just didn't know exactly what verses that I was going to focus on.
Yeah. Wow, I just forgot exactly what I was going to say. I'll transition. You have some questions for us.
Yes.
Let's hop into that.
Dude.
Maybe I'll think of what I was going to say. It literally, you're a little bit quiet back here, so I had to turn your volume up. I know, this is like the first time, Bryan, that you were a little quiet, but I had to get up and turn your volume up, and then
You're gonna have to stand up again and fix it soon.
Probably, but I'm used to it. So go ahead with your questions, and maybe I'll remember what I was going to say.
As you guys remember in the sermon, I talked about the person in my life who showed up and represented Jesus well, and just made the part of my life where I was just so confused and trying to live up a certain way, that this guy showed up and really brought me closer with Christ just by him being himself. His name was Don. Now I want to ask you guys, who was that in your life? Who, when I asked you guys to think of somebody or even think of an organization, in my mind I was thinking of somebody who could have said, like, Celebrate Recovery as a whole showed up in my life when I needed it, and maybe thought of like a few different people that represented this one organization. But yeah, for you guys, who was that person or group that showed up and just brought you closer to Christ? And one of the reasons you are at where you're at right now is because of this person.
Well, I think for me, I'd say there were two guys. One of them was a guy that was named Van Wadenberg, and we always just called him V-Dub because of his long last name, who was one of my coaches when I was in high school playing football, basketball. And I actually ended up living with him and his wife. He invited me to do that so I could stay in California and play another year. And then he ended up becoming a pastor and much late, and just stayed in touch with me throughout life, and then later offered to mentor me toward becoming a pastor myself. So there's a guy who just long term in life invested in me and kept doing it. And then a guy named Kim Ryan who as a pastor said, identified in me the gifts of being a pastor and ministering, and offered himself to say, I'm willing to come alongside of you and help you, and allowed me to really see what that was all about. Allowed me to see, literally brought me into his life and things that a pastor doesn't share what he talks about with somebody, in a counseling session or whatever. But he actually allowed me in on some of those things just to learn what it meant to be a pastor, and really encouraged me in the process when I didn't think there was any way a guy who'd been in prison could ever become anything like that, And he just kept going, just do what God's got in front of you to do and let him deal with that. So anyway, when I was listening to your message on Don and how much he allowed you into his life, in the nitty-gritty of life, man, I thought of those two guys doing the same thing for me. And it was a sacrifice for both of them.
Believe me, it was a sacrifice for Don to allow me into his life.
Yeah, but I think also the thing that you might not realize is probably what joy it gave him as well, because that seems self-promoting to say it was so great for him. But I'll bet you a nickel he just loved it too, the partnership.
I hope. He was an amazing man.
Yeah.
Even to the point where I just thought of this as you were talking, that there was a moment where Dawn and I were working, and it was Pastor Appreciation Day, I think, at our church. I don't know the exact day that is. Hayden
October.
and I are directors, so we don't get appreciated.
I've never been appreciated before in my life.
But Don was a director. He's one of the children's directors. There's a pretty big church. There's a few of them over specific age groups. And I remember we were at a staff meeting, and on the projector they were saying Pastor Appreciation. They listed the pastors of the church, and there was one name that I'm like, that person's a director. And I got so frustrated. I'm like, if that person's up there, Don better be up there. And I was ready to actually fight somebody to come to Don's defense, to the point where Don's like, dude, calm down. I was like, no, man, you need to be up there. Aww. If that person's up there, I was ready to fight somebody to get Don's name up there so somebody could appreciate him, which everybody did. Everybody loved Don, but I remember just feeling like I was a gang member sticking up for my gang.
For your homie.
You guys will appreciate Don, right? Don, stand up. You will appreciate him.
Well, that explains a lot. Right.
That explains a lot.
Yes.
No, when you were talking, I think it's easy for me to go back in ministry and remember who poured into me in ministry, but there was one example of ministry and real life, life on life mentoring. My first boss was Daniel Watts from Mariners Church, and I worked under him right out of actually my last year of college, and then right out of college. So super young adult. He was in our wedding, so he was there while I was becoming a wife, and then he and his wife poured into me with just showing me what young marriage looked like. They were probably 5 years advanced from us. So anyhow, I even to this day make the same kind of coffee that Marla made for her Bible study beforehand. I would come over and help her get the house ready for small group, and she would make a French vanilla coffee, and she would make a poppy seed loaf, and she'd cut it a certain way. And I just looked at how do you do hospitality? How do you do small groups? How do you do, they had a baby, and then 5 years later I had a baby. So it's how do you do that life? But he also was my boss. He was the children's and missions pastor. So I had kind of a dual mentorship going, in my work life, but then also in my, just growing up. So it was cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of investment poured out. And, I feel like I made mistakes as a protege in a way. Like I remember the day they brought home their baby from the hospital, my job was to like tell everybody that the baby had been born and that Daniel wouldn't be in that day for work. And then I don't know why I was at their house when they brought the baby home, but I overstayed my welcome. Like they were ready to like take care of their baby in their home, and I was like hanging out, like this is so fun, a new baby. And I didn't realize like, hey, they could probably use some quiet time, private
Did they
time.
tell you that, or do you look back?
No,
and think,
I look back and I'm like, what was I doing? Why didn't I just let them take a nap? So anyhow,
That's funny.
just growing up, learning,
Yeah.
being poured into.
Did you get those cookies from her too?
No, but man, I can make a poppy seed loaf like Marla Watts.
Why
and
have
you'd
you
be
never
surprised.
made this?
Yeah, I would say poppy seed muffins are my favorite.
I love
muffins.
poppy seed.
There's a long story behind why women in ministry don't always bake for the crew, but
Oh wow.
Okay.
Well, that went right over my head.
secret talent though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
Okay.
whatever.
Moving along.
Hayden, anybody in your life?
Well, it's funny. I think about there's been so many people, right? Like I had 2 different youth pastors growing up. I had a lot of like mentors at that early age. But I think for me, I think of Bryan knows this guy, Jake Wright, who he was the first guy that I volunteered under as a worship musician, and he definitely is responsible for growing me up in being a worship leader. And it started out like that, me just playing in the band for him. He would schedule me and all of that, and then kind of grooming me for like a leadership position and having me like learn what it's like. I remember there were so many moments where he would pull me aside afterwards and he's like, so this is why I did what I did. And for me, I just was like, okay, thanks for telling me, like whatever. But I look back on it and he was very intentional of like, you are going to do this one day and this is why I'm doing it. And also just giving me lots of opportunities to like, one, fail, but also succeed. And he always rooted for me. I remember one time which should not be a surprise to anybody on stage, but I showed up late to a worship rehearsal that I was the lead for. And I came in and I was just so upset with myself. And I showed up and I was running into the church, put my stuff down. And then he's like, go grab a coffee before you start. And then I was like, no, I'm late. I'm so sorry. He's like, just go grab some coffee. And then he walks in and he just was like, don't be late next time, but it's not a big deal. Like, you're going to make mistakes. And I know that you want to rush in and, correct and apologize to everybody, but these things happen. And I remember that being such a big moment for me. And that's one of the ways that I try to lead now too, is start with the grace and then go to the, you kind of missed the mark on this. But that for me was such a reminder because I came in feeling like a failure, one of my first times leading worship at this church, and I showed up late to practice, and that really stuck with me. And he even led me through, marriage advice when I started dating Sarah, then engaged and married, and just all areas of my life. He was such a big, he's a big example of bringing me alongside and not instructing me and teaching down to me. It was let's do this together and let's talk about these things. So I look back and he was the first person that I was actually ready to be led by, because my youth pastors always tried to, mentor me and lead me. And I wasn't really at that age where I was receptive to it. So he's the person that sticks out for me.
I think the thing that's so cool about these stories is knowing that these people, their fingerprints are on our lives, and as a result, it's on Arbor's life. There's a legacy that's being passed down of grace and creativity and leadership and poppy seed loaves.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
I don't think Arbor's been blessed with that yet, Alison.
Okay, next week, I promise, the poppy seed loaf. But I just love that because it's a heritage, right? That's being passed down by these awesome mentors, these godly people.
I love the fact that it's kind of through thick and thin.
Yeah.
So they've seen our good side, they've seen our ugly side, and they've hung in there with us.
Yeah.
Because as we think of a summer with Jesus, and then and then heading toward our family values. That's something that is so important, and for me, V-Dub knew me in high school when you're, just a high school kid doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And then in my case, even when I went through my prison experience and all, he didn't abandon me. He was there before and after that. And so in spite of your mistakes, he's there. And that to me is such a great example of somebody who's invited you into their life for good and bad. And they're just there to continue to support you, encourage you, and continue pointing you to Jesus. Yeah. No question about that. Yeah. But with the grace that Hayden was talking about, and and that you in your story of Don, Bryan, that he exemplified.
There's one part of Don that, man, just breaks my heart, and I wish I would have known this. But as you guys know, I told you when Don died that the year before his wife died, and so he was a widow. And he was just trying to move on with life without his wife. And then that picture that I showed, it was when he was holding Cade. He let me know that he was coming up to Seattle to stay at his son's house because he has an older son that lives here. And I was like, oh, awesome. What day can you hang out? Thinking that he was visiting his son. I had no idea that his son was away, I think a station somewhere. And I was so mad because I'm like, Don, you've been here all week by yourself? Like, I would have hung out with you every single day.
Yeah.
Like, I would have cleared everything.
What was up with that? He just wanted
away.
Reflection time?
Yep. He wanted away from our hometown where everyone just kept asking, talking, just wanted a week away. And I'm probably the last person you want to hang out with then. But I was so mad. I'm like, man, I wish I would have spent way more time when I had that last opportunity, and I didn't know it was the last opportunity to hang out with Don. But I am very blessed that the last moment that I met him, or not met him, that I got to hang out with him, that he got to hang out with my son, and then him and I were able to go get Briley's.
Yeah.
Yep. Our last meal together was Briley's.
Is there like a quote that you think of with him?
With Don?
Yeah.
Oh man. I'm telling you,
or even like a principle, right? Like something that he led by or did.
Dude, it's just follow Jesus and have fun. It was really follow Jesus and have fun.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, man, he was such an introvert. I mentioned that in the sermon, but he really, it was hard for him to hang out with people.
Yeah.
It was really, really hard. And to the point where I felt like I had to distance myself from him during the internship because I didn't want to be that person that annoyed him. But it was, I show up to work and Don wasn't there. And that was typical. Like, Don wasn't in his chair. That's because Don was somewhere else in our big downtown church, either building something, working on something, or just being away from people. So I'm like, I go in, I'm like, all right, let me go find Don. And so I would go through to all the Don spots at the church until I found Don, and then him and I would just hang out and work. It was the best 3 years of my life in ministry. It was, and that was my first taste of ministry.
How long have you been with me?
No, this has been great.
We all worked together for 3 years. Come on.
All of that was like the firsts.
Oh yeah.
It was experiencing working for a church for the first time. The first time of, as you guys know, the peek behind the curtain when you work for a church. It was my first time to be frustrated, and for this guy to talk me through all the different frustrations of wait, why are they doing this? This is not what I thought. And it was the growing pains that you have when you decide to go into the church full time. He was the man to help me through all of the growing pains.
I do love that. Follow Jesus and have fun.
Yeah.
Because I think too often we think following Jesus means that you don't have fun.
Yeah.
And it's so the opposite, you know? Yeah.
What about you, Cliff, or Allison? Any quotes or moments that just stick out from those people you mentioned?
I just remember with Daniel, I thought of this for a long time before I said it out loud to him because it felt weird for me to say, but he looked at people as they were talking to him. He looked at them with literally the eyes of Jesus. It looked like his eyes were soft and gentle and listening and understanding. And so I would watch him minister in all sorts of spaces. And he always just had the countenance kind of how I pictured Christ.
Yeah.
Loving and gentle and stuff. So
That's how I feel about Jake Wright, by the way.
excuse me?
What?
His mentor that
Yeah?
he's mentioned.
Oh.
That's Jake Wright.
What?
Oh,
is-
Jake Wright.
The Jake
Okay,
Wright. The
yeah.
way that he talks to you, like, was just like you are the most important
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In this moment. Like,
Yeah.
That's when you were talking about Jake, I'm like, oh gosh, I've never walked away from Jake like that guy doesn't know me or listen to me.
Care.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, what the V-Dub showed me is, and I coached football with him as assistant coaches. His reason for doing it was to get to know the kids and the coaches, and so he's given all kinds of time to the school doing that as a pastor. But it was his way to get out of the church and around people. And I can remember one day when my lawnmower wasn't working for some reason, and I casually mentioned that to him. We're having dinner, and all of a sudden he comes up without saying a thing, is in the backyard mowing my yard. He had brought his lawnmower to mow the yard. And that was the kind of thing he always did. He gave me my first chance to preach a message, and I had and I had kind of gone through it with him, and he said, okay, you've done your work. Everything else is there. I got your back. If somebody doesn't like what you say, don't worry about it. It'll come to me. I've got you covered with everything from the elder board to anybody else. You just do what God's told you to do and don't worry about it. And, that kind of, you're just kind of going, wow. Okay.
Well, it gives you a confidence,
Yes.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
someone's behind you and that they've got you. It reminded me of your story when Don handed you the mic and was like, "Hey, preach." And it was like you were under his authority, you were under his care, and he gave you confidence, right? That you could do this.
I wasn't going to share this, but there was a funny moment when I started becoming the teacher of this, and I loved it. That one Sunday we had a parents' day where all the parents came in, and Don's like, "Hey, I'm going to teach this one." I'm like, "What? It's like, you're going to teach? I've been doing this every week, and now there's parents here, and so you're going to teach." But looking back, I'm like, "Oh no, that was the right decision.
Yeah.
It was a protection over me. Like you will get so many insults, man. Like, just let me do this one." Like, but I remember being so offended because he didn't tell me that Sunday, just like he didn't tell me that I was going to teach that Sunday. So he didn't tell me that Sunday that I was going to teach, and as I was standing up, he was like, "No, I got this one." I'm like, "Thanks."
Yeah.
I think it's so exciting to think of us passing the baton and
Yeah.
doing these same things for people coming up in ministry as have been done for us and with us, and to do
I
that.
think
There's also pressure with it that I didn't realize.
Yeah.
That when Don died, people were thinking, is Bryan going to come back? And is he going to step foot in Don's shoes? And I was like, no. But,
Thank you.
But
but
thanks.
honestly, but I'm like, but am I supposed to?
Right.
Like, was that the discipleship that happened? And so, there was so much pressure that passing the baton that I'm like, am I giving up the baton? That was I supposed to, because I learned under him, was I supposed to grab his ministry and go? But right now his nephew's doing the job, and his nephew's doing an amazing job.
Well, like you said, follow Jesus. So that's got to lead anyway, doesn't it? Yeah. What I loved about those, and the one big thing I learned from that, and now have the chance to pass on is, and I've done that with the people that I've trained, as well as like our worship guy and stuff. When we have somebody come in, is to say what VW always told me: I'm going to tee you up for success. I'm going to do everything I can so that you'll be successful, and I'm going to make it as easy as possible for you, so that the odds of you succeeding are really good. I'm not putting you up there to see you, fumble and fail. If you do, I've got your back, but I'm going to do all I can before you ever get there to make it something that is a home run for you, or that is a success that we can build on. And I think that's something I would encourage anybody in ministry to think about. You don't just, you set them up for success.
Yeah.
And then let them go.
I think about with Jake Wright, in that him telling me to get coffee, and then he met me before practice to get coffee, and he said, I don't know the exact phrasing, but it was basically, don't let this one mistake change the outcome, right? Where you get down on yourself because you messed up, but do everything else like you were going to do it, right? Don't overcompensate. Like, I was late. Here we go. I got to get in there. He's like, just do what you were going to do. You made the mistake and don't let it color, the experience afterwards. And I think about that being a worship pastor. I'll go around and tell everyone, great job after Sunday morning. And their first response is, but I missed that cut, or I played the wrong note there. And it's like, but everything after that was amazing, right? But as especially I think musicians, I feel like preachers are the same.
Yeah.
You fixate on that mistake, right? And then you're working so hard to get that mistake out of your head. And I think having grace for yourself and others is so big in leadership, because we're all going to make mistakes, right? But don't let that dictate all your decisions moving forward. I think it's healthy to learn from mistakes, but to change the game plan. So. But I thought about that when you were saying we pass those things down, Alison, and that's something that I love that he taught me.
I love that. I read a book called In His Image by Dr. Paul Brand. Have you read that? He's a physician. He actually was a local physician, but he was a national author. I actually read it in California when I was an intern back 100 years ago. But he was a surgeon who had been trained in the UK, and he did some overseas work in India. He goes into operating rooms down in India, and he could tell by the way that another surgeon would hold the scalpel that he had been interned and trained by that guy back in the UK.
Oh, wow.
Just the way that people imitate.
Yeah.
Even in surgery or whatever the practice is or whatever your industry is, the way that you hold your instrument, the way that you take a breath before you pray, or whatever your thing is, it does point back to who has trained you.
Yeah.
But the beauty is that in His image, the whole concept of it is that it's the Lord who's impressing His heart on us and His perspective on us, and we in turn share that, and it kind of just goes down through the generations. So it's a beautiful analogy
I love
for that. He wrote some amazing books that overlay medical, things with spiritual things. So anyhow.
That's cool.
Yeah, that reminds me of that. You ready for my cool verse that I found too?
Yes, please. That you thought I was going to bring up
while you were preaching.
And I wish I did, because this is a very good verse for what I was preaching.
That was awesome. As you were talking about leadership and Don's influence in your life, I kept thinking, I hope he talks about Hebrews 13:7. It says, remember your leaders who spoke the word of God to you. Consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith. I just love that there's something graspable about that you can see it like faith lived out loud and faith lived in real life. Mm-hmm. And even if you're not that mature yet in your own faith, you can kind of practice what those mentors do and how they go about their life. And it's like it becomes, part of your muscle memory then. And, you find yourself doing it naturally. And I don't know. I just love that.
Yeah, it's so funny to look back too, because I thought about this when Hayden was saying who his mentor was. At that time in my life, at our college group, mentorship was like a big deal. That was like the sermon for every week was all about mentorship. And I was feeling really convicted by it. I'm like, I need to get a mentor while I'm working for Don. Yeah. I'm like, I need a mentor. And I went up to the worship guy in our college group because I love this guy. I loved the way when he would go up there and it just his little sermonettes during worship, they were just so spirit-filled. And I went up to him. I'm like, dude, I would prayed about it for a month because this was a big deal. This is me asking a girl to go out with me. I thought,
totally.
I wanted
it's
this.
the big prom ask.
Yeah. And so I went up to him, met him for coffee, and I asked him if he would be willing to mentor me. And he told me oh man, I'm just so busy right now. And it was just excuse after excuse. And my heart was like, ow, ow, ow. Just got super rejected by this guy to be my mentor.
Wow.
And so, I held on to that, and finding a mentor in my life has been always difficult. Not realizing I had one there whole time. The whole time. Like, and you know, I was looking at mentorship as an active, you meet once a month.
Right.
We have,
super intentional.
and maybe a book or something
Yeah.
to go through. While Don, his actions showed everything that I was wanting people to say.
Yeah.
But Don showed me. And it took me until I was in college to realize, that was it. That was the guy. And so I reached out to Don for everything. Talked to Don for everything. He was the mentor that I was looking for that I already had.
Bryan, when you were putting this message together, was it fun to think about and remember Don while you were doing it?
Dude, it was a lot of fun. And the one thing that I go back to is I told you guys in the message that we do like SNL skits for the kids. The biggest one that we had was called the Dude Brothers or something, where we would wear like those hoodie, like poncho type hoodie shirts with dreads and like hat and glasses, and we talk in the Cheech and Chong accent and teach the students a lesson in that like skit. Like looking back, I'm like, wow, that there was a lot of like, it made it look like we were on drugs, and today I would not do that. But it was like the funniest thing when Don and I would come out on stage in that gear. They all cheered because this was like the show that they were waiting for a while. And so yeah, him and I would just do random stuff like that all the time, where we just create a character. Both of us create characters, and we go out and teach the.
Isn't it funny that would probably, or at least potentially, be completely politically incorrect today, and you'd have to go back and apologize for doing that 10 years ago. Now,
but,
I was thinking, too bad there wasn't social media back then, so you could document it and show it. And then I thought, no, maybe it's maybe it's just for the best.
Yeah, and so he's like, the funniest thing is when they were. When he had his memorial service, it was on Zoom because it was, this time last year. And they showed like a montage of just stuff that he did. He was so, again, he's like in his 60s. He was so funny that there would be videos that he knew somebody would catch this, where he'd be riding like one of those pony on a stick things in front of security cameras, just riding around a hallway, just doing it in a room by himself, knowing that people are going to find it on the security camera. That became like at the church, it became like a Where's Waldo, where people are just looking at security footage like, all right, what did Don do next?
So funny.
And so,
That's awesome.
The
That's
guy
crazy.
just loved like having fun and
Yeah.
just being a joke. Loved it.
Aside from mentorship being one of your main points, I think also the representing Christ was such a good part for me. I loved, and I told you this morning at our team meeting, I feel like I want to watch this again. There's a message I want to watch again. And being an ambassador for Christ and representing him and being clothed with him is like a uniform that you wear out into the world, and that people know that you're with him, So I don't know. I wanted you to tell that funny story about you working at the gym with your uniform. Do you remember that one?
Yeah. So when I thought about that, we are clothed, when those who are baptized were clothed with Christ. Hayden and I used to work at this fitness place in Boise called Bodies in Motion, where we had to always tell people this is not a strip club, because that's what everybody thought.
It's not a good name. It's not a good name for a fitness club.
We were like, we work at Bodies in Motion, and at a Bible college, we're like, what? It's like, the tuition is crazy here. We got to pay for it. But
Let's reel it in, Bryan.
What'd you say?
Let's reel it in.
But Hayden and I ended up, bosses should have thought better, but ended up closing the place. So it was just Hayden and I by ourselves, just having fun in this place. But a lot of times there was this sports bar across the street that we'd go to that served like free popcorn. And so we'd go there and hang out. But every time before we walked in, I would take off my shirt that said Bodies in Motion, because I did not want to represent this company in here. Like
Did you have something on under it?
Yeah, always.
Oh, okay.
But it was like, like I'm going to a place where, I don't know, like I don't know if the company man, don't go to bars, please. So I'm like, I don't even want this company to at all look bad by anything that I'm doing. So I would take off the Bodies in Motion shirt because I didn't want to represent bad. I wasn't going to do anything bad, but as we know in ministry, sometimes perception is like you have to think also about perception. So I'm like, I'm not going to wear this shirt when I go into this sports bar.
Yeah.
But when we're, Christians, technically you can't do that. You're not
Right.
supposed
Right.
to do that,
Right.
but technically you can say, hey, I'm not representing Jesus
Right.
here.
Some people lose sight of that and they just,
Yeah.
I wear a cross necklace and I've worn it ever since my mom was in hospice, because I was like, nothing else really matters to me except for the cross right now. And then I kept thinking, moving past that, still nothing else matters more than that to me. But I am mindful of it when I go into places and gauge my response to things, and that I am an ambassador.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wearing something that identifies me as a Christ follower, and so I want my heart and my behavior to line up with that, accordingly.
And people are watching. And like Don's in the world, you don't know who's watching, because Don never told me that. Don never said the words, Jesus loves you the way you are. Like, I just had to see it from him. And so we never know when someone's needing advice from us, and just our actions show the advice that they're looking for or need at that time. So we are clothed with Christ. We need to represent Christ well. And like those disciples, like we are, in a symbolic way, we are in the same position as those 11 who saw Jesus go up, where he's like, now I trust you guys. You have this. And I wanted to let that know that, because when I was writing the sermon is when I realized the word trust, like there's different feelings behind it. Like I said in the sermon, there's a parent who leaves that says, I'm trusting you, where it's like, well, are
And that's
you?
kind of like a threat.
Yeah, I'm like, well, are you? It doesn't sound like you're
Yes.
trusting me.
Yeah.
But looking at Jesus, like, no, I trust you guys. You have this. I'm trusting you. You can do this. And we are in that same position that he's now trusting us. As you said, the baton passes down. Here we are 2,000 years later, and it's now we have the same mission, same goal as what those 11 had when Jesus ascended, that he's trusting us to represent well.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, in case nobody said it to you, Bryan, great job on Sunday, and thanks for sharing.
Good job, man.
Give us
Don
our
with
phrase
us.
again, would you?
The phrase, there's a time to spend with Jesus, and then there's a time to show up like Jesus, or show up in his likeness.
Well, I'm gonna close things out unless there's anything else you guys want to mention or ask.
No.
All right. Well, thank you for listening or watching, and we will see you guys next week.